What role do our feelings and emotions play in making good decisions? That's the question we're answering today. If you're just joining us, this week's series is all about decision making, how we use our minds, our bodies, our emotions, and finally our intuition to inform and influence our decision making process. Be sure to check out those other episodes if you want to deepen those skill sets. But for now, let's dive into today's topic, the emotional side of decision making. Now, most of us were taught, either directly or indirectly, that emotions are the enemy to good decision making. You know the idea. Don't be too emotional, be rational, think it through. The best decisions are the logical ones. But modern psychology and neuroscience have actually turned that belief completely upside down. Because researchers studying decision making discovered something really surprising. When people lose access to their emotional centers of their brain through an injury or neurological damage, they don't suddenly become hyper rational decision making machines. They actually become terrible decision makers. They can still analyze, they can still list pros and cons, they can still reason through outcomes, but they struggle to choose between even simple options. Because emotions are not the opposite of rational thinking, they're the system that tells us what actually matters. In fact, psychologists now understand emotions as kind of an evaluation system. They quickly scan a situation and ask questions like, is this safe? Is this meaningful? Is this unfair? Is this an opportunity? Is this a loss? Emotions are constantly answering the question, what is the significance of this moment for me? And they do it faster than conscious thought can, which means by the time your mind begins analyzing a decision, your emotional system has already weighed in. Another fascinating discovery in psychology is that emotions also act as a kind of compressed memory system. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio described this through something called the somatic marker hypothesis. The idea is that when we go through emotionally meaningful experiences in life, success, embarrassment, betrayal, pride, our brain tags those memories with emotional signals. So later, when a similar situation appears, we feel something, a little spark of excitement, a little tightness in the stomach, a sense of resistance. Those signals aren't random, they're our past experiences speaking quickly. Emotion is essentially memory, but in fast forward. But here's where things get really interesting. Psychologists studying emotional intelligence have discovered that people who are better at naming their emotions actually make better decisions. There's even a term for this. It's called emotional granularity. It's basically emotional intelligence multiplied by 10. Instead of saying, I feel bad, people with higher emotional awareness might notice, I feel anxious, I feel resentful, I feel disappointed, I feel overwhelmed. And each of those emotions point to something different. Anxiety might signal uncertainty. Resentment might signal a violated boundary. Overwhelm might signal too many variables. So, the more precisely we can understand what we're feeling, the more clearly we can understand what our mind and our body are trying to tell us. And emotions also change how we see the world. Research shows that certain emotions actually shape our attention. When we feel fear or anger, our attention narrows. We become more cautious and more focused on potential threats. But when we feel curiosity or joy, our attention broadens. We see more possibilities. We become more creative and open to exploration. In other words, different emotions illuminate different parts of the map when we're making decisions. But there's another layer to this conversation that I think is even more important, and it's this. A lot of the time, we don't struggle with decisions because we don't know what to do. We struggle with decisions because we're afraid of how the outcome will make us feel. Psychologists call this affective forecasting. Humans are actually quite bad at predicting our future emotions. We imagine failure will feel devastating forever. We imagine rejection will totally destroy us. We imagine making the wrong decision will haunt us for years. And so we hesitate, we stall, we overthink, not because the decision itself is impossible, but because we're trying to avoid those certain emotions or chase others. But something really interesting happens when we change our relationship with those emotions. When we stop trying to avoid discomfort, when we stop trying to guarantee happiness, when we become willing to feel things like uncertainty, embarrassment, disappointment, awkwardness, fear. We suddenly become much freer decision makers because we're no longer asking, how do I make sure this never feels bad? Instead, we're asking, what do I actually want? There's a subtle but powerful shift there because when we're chasing or avoiding emotions, our decisions become reactive. But when we learn to tolerate the full spectrum of human feelings, our decisions become intentional. And this is why emotional awareness is so powerful in decision making. Not because emotions should control the decision, but because emotions reveal what matters to us. They tell us where our values lie, where our fears are, what our desires are. So the next time you're facing a difficult decision, instead of only asking, what should I do? You might also ask, what am I feeling about this? And what might that feeling be trying to tell me? Because your emotions aren't trying to control your decisions. They're trying to show you what matters inside of them. And tomorrow we're going to take this conversation one step deeper into that quiet voice that sometimes appears in the background while the mind, the body, and the emotions are all speaking. That voice we often call intuition. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and check out the other episodes this week for a deeper look at decision-making skills using your mind and body. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode on the Contentment Creator channel, where we looked at how to make decisions from our logic, our body, our emotions, and our intuition. Whether you caught the whole episode or one of our segments, either way, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. And I hope you are subscribed so you don't miss next week's episode. Join me in my mission to turn a world full of content creators into a world of contentment creators. Bye, y'all.